Hello everyone, I say it's about time we return after a couple of weeks off, so today we're going to be doing Bio 9, which is the 9th biology thing we've done, and it's going to be on evolution and classification, and it includes variation and natural selection. So here we have it, evolution and classification. So let's start off with variation. So what is variation? It's basically the difference between cells or organisms, also groups of organisms. So it can be interspecific, which is between different species, or intraspecific, which is within a species. Notice that's inter and that's intra, and that's within in one species itself. So not between different species. It all has to be the same thing. So next, different things affect variation. So genes affect it, which changes the genotype. So things that are only affected by genes include eye colour, natural hair colour and blood group, and this data is often discontinuous, and that's how we can tell what it is, because it has distinct values. Like your eye colour cannot be anything within a scale, it's always one value, and you can split it into however many values, but there's never going to be like a numerical amount of it, or at least a numerical amount of it. Whereas with weight, height and IQ, that goes on an entire scale. And it's also affected by the environment, so that means it's a phenotype. And it's in continuous data. As I said, it has a range of values. It could be anything from 1 to 100, whereas eye colour can only be like 4 or 5 different options. So next, let's move on to mutations. So mutations are changes in a gene or chromosome. So mutations basically can cause characteristic changes. This can be harmful, neutral, or beneficial. So some mutations help things, and some mutations make things worse. So next, let's move on to one of the main things about this, evolution. So, evolution. Organisms gaining new characteristics to survive over millions of years. This is basically how certain animals have survived for so long. They've changed and adapted to their environment. So yeah, natural selection. Organisms without this adaptation slowly die out and become extinct. So they can't reproduce to pass on genes. So eventually, all of these organisms will have the new trait. So an example of this is the giraffe. The giraffe originally had a short neck, but all the ones with short necks died out and they became extinct. So only the ones with long necks could live on, because they had the adaptation of being able to reach leaves from higher up trees. This is similar to antibiotic resistance, as the non-resistant bacteria will all die off, whilst the resistant bacteria lives on and reproduces quickly, so that it's full of resistant bacteria, which is why you need to complete a full cycle of antibiotics if you are told so. So next we're on to something similar to natural selection, but including human involvement, so selective breeding. That's when humans artificially select the plants or animals that will breed to keep particular characteristics in the population. This is mainly when it's positive to humans, like you want to make wheat grow quicker, or you want to make cows produce more milk. So, however, there are bad things of this, like it leads to a lack of variation. With a founder effect, that means there's a small amount of alleles, which can lead to things like diseases and stuff. And yeah, they're more likely to die of disease, as due to the lack of variation, they can't adapt to environmental changes. So next, let's move on to genetic engineering. So it's all about changing genes, and it can be used to prevent disease and bring immunity, or to treat genetic diseases using gene therapy. So basically, how it takes place is a gene gets transferred from one organism to another to give a desirable characteristic. So an example of this is is to grow artificial insulin. An insulin gene is cut out of a base DNA in a human by an enzyme. And a plasmid is taken out of the bacterium by an enzyme splitting it open. So this is us taking something out of the bacteria, and then we put the gene into the plasmid by another enzyme and put the plasmid back in the bacteria to make the bacteria rapidly produce what is effectively insulin. So that's how we do that artificially. So next, let's move on to fossils. So fossils are often used as evidence for evolution, and they're basically remains of organisms from many years ago found in rocks. Soft-bodied organisms are not found in fossils, as they do not have bones, I'm pretty sure. So basically, there are three ways that things can be turned into fossils. So the gradual replacement of bones and teeth by minerals, the preservation of the animals, as in places of no decay such as swamps, the bones won't properly decompose. However, another method where they do decompose is where they decay inside of clay and it ends up leaving a cast. So it's not the actual animal we can see, but we can see what it looked like from what was all around it, which is quite interesting. So next, another important part of this is classification. This is basically groups that are based on shared features. So there are different places in the classification system. So we start with domain, then we go down to kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. So the domains are basically eukarya, bacteria, and archaea. So basically, bacteria and archaea are both the prokaryotes, but eukarya is all the others, so the protica, planta, animalia, and fungi. So it's basically animals, plants, funguses, and a certain type of bacteria. And as we go down, it gets more and more specific. So for example, phylum's the one where it's about, like, if it's a mammal and that sort of thing. So phylum will be like mammals, arthropods, that sort of thing. But as we get down, it gets more and more specific every time. So by the end, you'll end up with a species like that is the actual thing. And how we make the thing with a binomial system is basically we combine the genus and the species to get the scientific name of the organism. So for example, the domesticated dog would be Canis familiaris, which is Canis, which is its genus, and species is familiaris. Combines the two things together. And I think a cat is Felis domesticus. But as you'll notice, the genus is the same for all things that were dogs or all things that were cats. So, for example, Canis would be also for wolves and wild dogs, as well as the Felis for things such as lions. So how do we define a species? So a species is basically something that can produce fertile offspring. And if the offspring isn't fertile, then that is something called speciation, I think. And that is where species mix. But if it's not fertile offspring, then they aren't considered a species, even if they can breed. So yeah, basically that was evolution and classification. Bit of a long video today. Actually, I'm not sure. I haven't done them in a while. Anyway, that was fun. I think I got louder this time, which is a lot better. So, okay, bye.